Just 1 year into the Biden presidency, and it's in turmoil. The pandemic the president promised to shut down is still out of control. Inflation is at a 4-decade high, canceling out rising wages. The border is a mess. Violent crime continues to climb, and many are now asking, why hasn't anyone been fired yet? This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Compagno. Here today are my co-hosts Kayleigh McEnany and Harris Faulkner, former State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus, and in the center seat, Fox & Friends co-host Steve Doocy. Now, Time magazine is marking President Biden's first year in office with a bleak cover capturing his rough presidency, showing the president being rained on with a giant cloud hovering over the Oval Office. Behind Biden are several boxes of those promised COVID rapid tests. Just 6 months ago, however, the same magazine showed President Biden looking tough, wearing his trademark aviators before his first meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin. The White House hitting so many bumps in its first year. It has many Biden allies now asking who is going to be held accountable for this, starting with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain. Kayleigh McEnany, I can think of no better person to get first thoughts on this.
Yeah, Emily, remarkable. Those two covers that you had up there from Time. What a fall from grace in just a few short months. And to get at really how bad things are in Washington, sometimes you have to read behind the lines, Emily, looking at a story and the anonymous sourcing and kind of trying to read a little bit into what is going on. And I'll tell you this, at the beginning of the administration, a few months in, we started getting those Kamala Harris stories, as we've talked about here on Outnumbered, about the vice president's office being in turmoil. There was one CNN article that had almost 36 sources. But largely, the Biden team has been pretty disciplined at not talking to press, not leaking, and Joe Biden's inner circle has been largely insulated from those types of stories until now. Now we're seeing story after story with finger pointing at Ron Klain, among others. There's a CNN story that came out with, guess how many sources? 36 sources about President Joe Biden. And interestingly, in that CNN article, one of the president's private conversations was leaked. It said this, that in private, publicly, he told us he doesn't look at the poll numbers, or he doesn't believe them. Rather, he told us that during his press conference. Well, privately, he's expressing exasperation that his message isn't breaking through and saying, quote, why is no one seeing it? So you now have people leaking the president's conversations. Of course, the Trump administration was plagued with leaks from the very beginning. But this is a really right-hand turn for the Biden administration that finally, as the Titanic is sinking, the finger pointing is starting. But unfortunately, that Titanic is not just the Biden administration, it's our country.
Oh, and Steve, so on that note, panning out from the White House to the greater public, we know now that per those recent polls Kayleigh mentioned, 56% of Americans disapprove of Biden's performance, and 70% of them do not want the president to run again in 2024, Steve.
Those numbers aren't surprising because just everything's gone crazy. I mean, there's the question, would you like to see Biden run for president in 2024? 70% say no. Who are the 30% who say yes, just out of curiosity?
Right.
Obviously, his hardcore base. Going back to the Time magazine cover, commemorating the first year, although it seems slightly longer for some odd reason, I thought Time magazine was trying to push the president into doing something about climate change. Look at this. It's raining inside the Oval Office. You got to fix it. But if you look on the desk, remember Mitt Romney got in trouble for binders? Well, on the desk, you got a bunch of binders for Mr. Biden. They are inflation, Putin, Build Back Better, voting rights, and President Trump. Where's the binder on the border? Or where's the binder on gas prices? And more importantly, where's the binder on crime? You know why they don't have binders on that?
Yep.
Because those are not important in Biden world. And I have heard from somebody at the White House that there's an expression in Biden world, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, nobody knew. And I'm not talking about nobody knew what was going to happen. I'm talking about no new people. For the most part, the team who he worked with as Senate, when he was in the Senate office, when he was vice president, when he's running for president, those are the people who have surrounded him. And those are the people who are going to be with him. And they are with him 100%. It's like the old expression. I think it was Ben Franklin. He said, we either hang together or we hang separately. So I don't see anybody getting fired.
Harris, that's a really interesting part in terms of building that tribe, that dedicated following. I mean, the result is you become deaf to any dissent whatsoever. You become disconnected. And to Steve's point about the binders, we were sort of talking about that yesterday, that a town hall would have been better than a press conference, because then the questions that Americans care about could have been asked to this president, like crime, like immigration and such. Harris.
I have had a day of being flanked by doocies, and I love it. So last hour, Peter was on, and I said, look, it wasn't part of what we were going to talk about. We were just going to have him do his report, and I go to my first guest. But I said, wait, I don't want to miss an opportunity here, because no one asked about crime. And look, we all saw the president move on from Peter. So, I mean, it wasn't like... He said, well, my second question was about crime. There's no way the president could have known that, I guess, but he probably could have guessed it. And he just moved on quickly. Look, Peter was ready right there with the question, but nobody else was. And I asked him to take a temperature of the room or tell me what the natural sound was like. Anybody chattering about what they didn't get to ask him? Was crime on the list? He didn't hear anything. Why are those details important? Because if you know that there is complicity and sycophants around you, you don't have to dance too hard. Everybody's going to clap. And look, as a person in the media, I don't want to be part of that. But you got to go. And I said to Peter, I'm glad you're always there. You got to go and wait for your shot. He gave one reporter, I think, like 4 or 5 questions, follow-ups. We didn't get that chance, but that's okay, because Peter said he'll be there next time. And how do we know there has to be a next time? Because those polling numbers are sinking still. I mean, you think there's a threshold where they're almost unmeasurable below the line of the water, but that's not true. We can watch it sink to the sand if he lets it. So, Steve, you bring up such an interesting point about surrounding yourself with fresh and new voices that dissent at times so that you get everybody's opinion in, right? Well, who would I necessarily take to a mayor's meeting today? How about a top prosecutor? And I don't know how the vice president would do in that environment, but she was a top prosecutor, right? She was the attorney general in her former state of California. They are lit up on fire right now with stats that show that homicides are off the charts. Why not do a side-by-side with those mayors with somebody who's actually prosecuted some cases? I think it's fascinating. We're seeing more of him alone now, but it's not helping him or us at this point when it comes to crime.
Morgan, I'm curious, given the depth of your experience with an administration, what do you make of the turning tide of the media and the lack of any terminations coming out of the White House?
Well, listen, I've been around 4 administrations, actually. Hopefully, I'm younger than I look. Or wait, no, I'm older than, you know what I mean. So I started in the Bush administration. I actually served in Obama, Trump, and...
As long as one of them wasn't the Eisenhower administration, we're good.
No. And I'm actually technically in the Biden administration as a Navy Reserve officer, so I've been around for a while.
Wow.
I've seen administrations come and go. I have seen what the media does when they turn on people. But Emily, I think you hit the nail on the head by talking about the lack of terminations. And if I can just bring the international angle into it, for me, the precedent was set when President Biden refused to fire or hold anyone accountable after we had the debacle in Afghanistan. We have 13 dead Americans on a withdrawal that, in my opinion, could have been prevented. It should not have happened the way that it did. And I think whenever the president did not hold anyone on his senior team accountable for one of the most embarrassing actions that has happened to us as a nation since our withdrawal from Vietnam, that sets the precedent. And by the way, you know, we were talking about this earlier with Bill Hemmer, I was at least. This is one of the reasons why you see bad actors acting up around the world, right? Why is Putin behaving this way? Why is the Chinese Communist Party? Why are the Ayatollahs in Iran threatening to kill President Trump just last week? Because they think they can get away with this behavior from this administration.
Wow. That's kind of what we have on crime. The criminals taking over.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, now that perhaps the mainstream media might be able to be seeing reality and disseminating it, perhaps the future looks different. We'll cross our fingers. Coming up, Russia has 100,000 troops positioned along the Ukrainian border. But President Biden is struggling to clearly communicate what the United States is prepared to do if Vladimir Putin orders an invasion, and the world is watching.